Hi everyone, I'm Melissa with my partners Yarley and Adriana. We are going to debate some questions such as first, what are the benefits and drawbacks of standardized testing and global education systems, and which countries rely heavily on standardized testing and what are the outcomes. The second one, what are the main challenges facing the education system in Colombia and how do these challenges compare to those in other countries. And the third one, do you think that Colombia should adopt educational practices from other countries? Why or why not? And which practices do you think will be most beneficial for Colombia? So let's start. One of the benefits of standardized testing is the assessment consistency. This type of test provides a consistent way to measure students across different schools, cities, districts, or even countries. And also, this consistency helps educators, policymakers, and parents to know how students are performing relative to set standards. However, I think that I have more drawbacks since sometimes this type of tests perpetuates inequities in education. Factors such as socioeconomic status, sociocultural background, language proficiency, and some disability or condition can influence test performance, creating disparities and limiting opportunities for some marginalized groups of students with some conditions. Also, teachers sometimes can feel pressure to teach for the test, focusing on teaching content and strategies for students to perform the test better.
Well, another benefit of standardized tests is that they allow teachers to identify areas where the students have strengths or are struggling the most. So these test results allow teachers to adapt their lessons and to develop new strategies to support students in areas where they need improvement. Additionally, for students who are excelling, teachers can use the test results to guide them towards new topics or themes. I agree with Melissa when she says that standardized tests have more drawbacks, especially when she says that sometimes teachers focus too much on teaching for the test and not on meaningful learning. Another drawback that I see is the stress and anxiety that this kind of test can generate in students because that can negatively impact in their life and performance on the test.
Well, I think that one of the advantages is that at least in Colombia we have the ICFES exam. ICFES in Colombia not only acts as an evaluation tool but also plays a crucial role in creating opportunities for talented students regardless of their socioeconomic status to access higher education through various opportunities, particularly scholarships. However, I consider that this can also be a negative thing in some contexts, especially in those contexts where students live in poverty and do not have economic stability. I think that being the IFES a requirement to enter to universities, obtaining a low score in it is not an option for those students since that would mean being left out of a public university or having to go into debt for many years to enter to a private one.
I agree with you, Adriana. In some institutions in Colombia, especially the ones that are located in areas of armed conflict, the government doesn't provide a good educational service, so students don't have the basis to present their IFES and they lose the opportunity to access higher education since the IFES score is the highest requirement for that. One of the countries that heavily relies on standardized testing as a key component of its educational system is Colombia. The primary standardized test used in Colombia is the SABER test, which assesses academic achievement and is administered in different levels, such as primary and secondary education. The most common outcomes of standardized testing in Colombia are first, the accountability and data collection. The SABER test serves as a tool for accountability, providing data on student performance that informs educational policies and reforms. The results are used to evaluate schools, identifying areas needing improvement, and allocating resources effectively. The other one is the comparative evaluation. Standardized tests such as SAVER enable to compare student performance against national and international standards. This allows Colombia to access how its students compare to global educational benchmarks and identifying strengths and weaknesses in the educational system. And the last one is the access to higher education. As we were discussing in the previous question, in Colombia, SAVER tests are also used as a criterion for university admissions. Higher scores can improve students' chances of gaining admission to prestigious university or obtaining scholarships, thereby influencing future career opportunities.
Well, several countries rely heavily on standardized tests in their education system. One example is China, where the education system heavily focuses on the Gaokao, which is a notorious difficult standardized college entrance exam. This exam is very important because it determines what university the students can attend. As a result, students face tremendous pressures from their family and society to excel in the Gaokao. A lot of people criticize this exam and they say that it just promotes memorization and test taking strategies instead of fostering deep learning. Also, the months leading up to the exam, students usually study for more than 12 hours a day, and unfortunately, there is a rise in suicides associated with this intense pressure that students are facing. So I think countries shouldn't rely that much on standardized tests because that is having a lot of consequences in students.
What Jarle says is very true, and it is something that happens also in Japan. Well, it actually happens in many Asian countries, for example, South Korea, Singapore, Thailand. In Japan, for example, these standardized tests have maintained high level of academic achievement and discipline among Japanese students. However, the intense pressure to succeed in these tests can lead to high level of stress and a culture of extreme competitiveness from an early age. This pressure and stress can lead to tragic outcomes such as suicide. According to Japan National Police Agency, more than 500 people under the age of 20 committed suicide in 2020, and academic pressure was a major factor.
Very interesting question. There are several challenges in the educational system in Colombia. For example, the significant disparities in the educational quality between urban and rural areas and among different socioeconomic groups. Rural schools often lack infrastructure, resources, and qualified teachers, leading to poor educational outcomes for students in those areas. Also, violence related to armed conflict and drug trafficking affect educational access and quality, and especially in conflict affected regions. Schools in these areas may be targeted, and students and teachers may face risks that disrupt learning and attendance.
I agree with Melissa when she talks about the challenges that Colombia is facing in terms of education, especially when she talks about the structural deficiencies, because it is true that bringing good education or high quality education to rural areas is very difficult because the challenges faced in that part of the country are very different. For example, sometimes there is a lot of students, or sometimes there are no facilities to bring a proper education. For example, there is lack of laboratory, there is not library, there is not technology that can be used in order to give a proper class. So this is affecting very much a Colombian education system. It's not just in rural areas, because I have seen that in urban areas also schools are struggling and facing the same challenges, especially the ones that are in the public sector.
I agree with both of you, but I think that beyond the lack of good infrastructure in school, violence is affecting education much more, especially children and adolescents. In some regions, regions of Colombia like Caquetá and Nariño, the presence of armed groups and violence affect school attendance and performance. And the safety in these places is a constant concern, and students and their families are often forced to move to escape the violence, and this causes too many drop out of school.
Mexico is one of the countries that share similar issues of education inequality between urban and rural areas, as well as socioeconomic disparities affecting access to quality education. Also, Mexico is a country known for its violence and drug trafficking and organized crime that also affects school safety and attendance in certain regions.
So I agree with Melissa when she said that Colombia and Mexico has similar challenges. Another country that has those challenges is Peru, because a lot of Peruvian schools, especially those in remote areas, don't have basic amenities like clean waters or walking barriers in the school. They also lack enough textbooks, computers, and other learning materials for students. So both Colombia and Peru struggle to provide adequate school infrastructure, um, particularly in the rural and underserved communities. So I think this is affecting very much the education system. It makes it very difficult for students to get a high quality education.
A country that is also experiencing a similar situation is Afghanistan, where violence and gender discrimination have severely limited the access to education, especially for girls, and in this country many schools have been closed or even destroyed.
Of course, adopting practices from other countries will help Colombia to improve their educational quality. Learning from successful educational system can help Colombia to enhance the quality of teaching and learning. Practices that have proven effective in other countries, such as innovative teaching methods, curriculum reforms, or teaching training approaches, can contribute to better academic outcomes for Colombian students.
Yes, I agree that Colombia should adopt practices from other countries in order to improve the system. But I think it is important to highlight that these strategies should be adapted thoughtfully and strategically, taking into account the local context. So this practice should be adapted to fit Colombia's cultural, social, and economic context, because most of the time what works well in one country might not necessarily work the same way in another. I also think that it should be ensured that these practices are sustainable in the long term, and it can be implemented effectively within Colombian existing infrastructure and resources. So in this case, I think Colombia should put the necessary economic resources into education, and then we can choose the strategies that work well and we cover the system needs and, most important, the students' needs in order to improve the whole system.
I agree with your lay. I think that any strategy or practice must be realistic in terms of available resources, which implies prioritizing those that are accessible and sustainable within the Colombian economic context. We know that Colombia is a country with great cultural and regional diversity, so any practice adopted must be flexible and adaptable to different realities. For example, educational strategies must consider the specific needs of indigenous and rural communities.
I agree with you guys, and it's very important to take into account our context when adapting practices from other countries. It is vitally important to know our students, their culture, their preference when seeking to adapt new practices to our educational system. Because students in other countries are different, teachers are different, and sometimes the practices can work different because of that. Colombia could significantly enhance its educational system by adopting several practices from Finland, which is known for its highly successful approach focused on equity and teacher professionalism. So one of the practices that the government of Colombia can adopt is ensure that teachers have access to master degrees, because in Finland, teachers are required and expected to have a master degree, ensuring that they possess deep subject knowledge and pedagogical skills. So, as in Finland, the Colombian government can ensure that in order that in that way the system can improve a little bit.
I agree with Melissa that Finland, that is known for its excellent education system, offers practices that Colombia could adopt to improve its own system. One example is the level of education required for teachers. So Finnish teachers are required to have a master's degree and they undergo into rigorous training before they start teaching. This ensures that teachers are well prepared and committed to their professions, and this results into better teaching practice and students' performance. That is very different here in Colombia because sometimes here people with other professions start teaching without receiving the correct training. So in Finland, that is very different, and not just anyone can become a teacher. Another practice that I like about Finland is that the teaching profession is highly respected and valued. So Finnish society views teaching as a prestigious career that is comparable to professions like medicine or law, which help just to draw talented individuals into the profession and not just anyone, because the people who goes into teaching in Finland are the people who really wanted to be a teacher. So another characteristic in Finland is that teachers are well remunerated and they have excellent working conditions. So they also have autonomy in the classroom to apply the strategies that they consider the best. So all these characteristics made the whole system just perform better. So if Colombia can adopt these strategies from Finland, I think it will help the system a lot and it will change the perspective that some people have here about teachers, and it can improve a lot because there are gonna be more people that are trying to do the best for students and that are applying the correct strategies in order to just get the best outcomes.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I think that another thing that Colombia should copy from Finland is the curriculum. As Melissa said, in Finland, the curriculum is flexible and skills oriented. And I think that this could be implemented in Colombia to focus more on key competencies and less on memorization. And this way, promoting more meaningful and lasting learning.